In today's video, we will be going over the entire sourdough bread making process from the beginning to the end. To start, we have all of our materials laid out. We have room temperature water, flour, salt, sourdough starter, and a scale and mixing bowl. First, start by pouring in our water, then our sourdough starter and our salt, and stir to combine. You want the sourdough starter to be mostly dissolved, but it's okay if there's some lumps in there still. Then we're going to add in our flour and mix to combine. I like to first mix with a spatula to get all the extra flour around the edges incorporated, and then I go in with my hands. We are then going to knead for 10 minutes. You can do this with a stand mixer if you prefer, but I like doing it by hand. 10 minutes does seem like a long time, but this step is crucial in ensuring the ingredients are fully incorporated and those gluten networks get really nice and strong. As I demonstrate here, at the beginning of kneading, you can see how shaggy and loose that dough is and how weak those gluten networks are. 5 minutes into kneading, you can see how much more strength and elasticity this dough has. Then around the 10-minute mark, this dough has so much more strength. We can then cover the dough with a damp towel or plastic wrap, whatever you prefer, and let it rest for 30 minutes before starting our stretch and folds. Following the recipe from the Sourdough Mini Guide, we are going to do 4 sets of stretch and folds 30 minutes apart. To start a stretch and fold, we are going into one side of the dough, picking it up, stretching, wiggling, and folding it over. Thus, stretch and fold. We are going to do this 4 to 6 times or until all sides of the dough have been stretched and folded. As you can see here, the dough is sticking to my fingers quite a bit. It can be helpful to wet the fingers before doing a stretch and fold. This is the second set of stretch and folds, and we can see that the dough has a little bit more strength to it. Now the third set of stretch and folds, that dough is much stronger. Those gluten networks are really starting to form now. And most recipes will call for 4 sets of stretch and folds. I personally have a little bonus here for you guys. I like to do 3 sets of stretch and folds and then finish with a coil fold. A coil fold, we are going to pick up the dough and tuck the ends under instead of stretching and folding over top. I like finishing with a coil fold because it makes the dough really nice and smooth on top, which is very helpful going into bulk fermentation, as that smooth top can help make the signs of bulk fermentation more noticeable. Now that the stretch and folds have been completed, we can cover our dough and let it bulk ferment. In the Sourdough Mini Guide, I go over signs of bulk fermentation, and we will go over a couple of those signs in this video. Here I'm showing you the dough after the last set of stretch and folds, so there hasn't been much change yet, but around the 4-hour mark, we can see how that dough has started to expand and fill out the bowl and grow. At this point, the dough is quite sticky. Dough that is properly bulk fermented should not be super sticky. I'll also demonstrate the window pane method here. So I'm picking up the dough and seeing how much elasticity it has and if the light will shine through it. And the light is shining through, but again, the dough is sticky and there is some micro tearing happening when I pick up that dough. We are now at the 10-hour mark for this bulk fermentation. The bulk fermentation has completed. We can see how much that dough has grown and has really filled out the bowl. It's nice and jiggly, and there is a domed edge on the side of the dough. And again, with the window pane test, we can see that the dough is nice and strong, but it is not super sticky anymore. Once your dough has completed bulk fermentation, we can move on to shaping. First thing we need to decide is what shape of proofing basket we will be using. We have a choice of an oval one, also known as a batard, or a round one, also known as a boule. Now we need to generously flour our proofing basket. This will help create a barrier between the proofing basket and the dough so the dough does not stick to it. And we also need to generously flour our working surface so the dough does not stick to that. We can coax the dough out of the bowl onto our working surface. You can either use your hands to do this or a bench scraper. And using floured fingers, we can gently pull the dough out into a rectangular shape. Now I want to note that there are many different ways to shape dough. You don't have to do it this way if you have a different method. I'm just showing you what works well for me and what I like to do. So we're going to take the left side of the dough and fold it just past the center line and brush off a little bit of the extra flour, and then we are going to fold over the right side. I prefer to do the rolling method, so I start at the end and I roll firmly but gently. I want to create tension, but I don't want to deflate the dough. And then we can see some of those ends sticking out, so I'm going to take some of the dough on top and pull it out and fold it underneath to create a nice smooth edge. Now here we can decide if we want to use the oval shape or the round shape proofing basket. If you want to use a rectangular proofing basket, you can gently use your hands or your bench scraper to tuck those ends in more, give it a little wiggle to create more of a oval rectangular shape, and then you can pull the dough up and flip it into the proofing basket. For a round proofing basket, this is a little more involved but still easy. You can use the palm of your hands or a bench scraper. At about 4 o'clock, you're going to push the dough and then pull it towards you. Push and pull, push and pull. And you can repeat this about 8 to 10 times until you get a shape that you like. Here, I'll demonstrate what it looks like with the bench scraper as well. Once you have a shape that you're happy with, we're going to slide that bench scraper underneath, or again, you can use your hands, and then we're going to flip the dough into the proofing basket, seam side up. And now this is a little bit of an extra step. You don't have to do this, but I like to do what's called stitching. There, I just demonstrated how to do it in a oval proofing basket. You're just simply going across. For a round proofing basket, we're going to do more of a clock method. So you take 12 and 6 and fold them towards each other, 3 and 9, etc. Go around your dough until it has all been stitched up, and the stitching just creates extra tension and strength in the dough, so that ensures that it stays strong and you have the best oven spring while baking. Now that we have shaped our dough and put it into our proofing basket, we can now proof the dough. We can do this by either room temperature proofing or cold proofing in the refrigerator. Use the method that you prefer. Once the dough has been properly proofed, we can move on to scoring. You want to score your dough right before you bake it. You don't want to score it too early, or the dough may lose elasticity and its shape. So that means you need to preheat your oven with your Dutch oven inside about 30 minutes before you want to score your dough. To begin, we flip over our proofing basket with dough onto parchment paper or a silicone baking mat. Then choose your tool, a bread lawn, steel blade, or a super sharp knife. To cut, you want to use smooth, even pressure starting at the top of the loaf and moving your way down. As you can see, you want to cut quite deep, about a ½ inch deep. If your initial score is not deep enough, you can simply go back and score it again. Now that we've finished scoring, we can take out our preheated Dutch oven, remove the lid, and carefully place your dough into the Dutch oven by picking up the corners of your parchment paper or silicone baking mat. Place the lid back on your Dutch oven and bake with the lid on for 20 minutes. After the first initial 20 minutes, remove the lid and bake for another 20 minutes with the lid off. You don't have to take the Dutch oven completely out of the oven when you take the lid off. I simply did it here to show you what the loaf looks like after that initial 20 minutes. After baking, your bread should be beautiful and golden brown. Now comes the hard part, waiting at least an hour to let it cool before slicing and enjoying.